Good afternoon, everybody in YouTube land. It's Logan Albright here to talk to you about the book I just finished reading, which is dun, 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 The Three Musketeers. That's right, it's a classic, and it's one I haven't read until just now, so I'm going to tell you what I thought about it. All right, first of all, The Three Musketeers. This edition that I have here is the Everyman's Library edition. The spine is a little bit boring. I'm not a big fan of the dust jacket, but if you pop the dust jacket off, you get a lovely little burgundy hardcover, which will look nice on your shelf with the others. So it's a pretty good edition. It's an anonymous 19th century translation, which is kind of the standard translation. I didn't find any others available when I was looking at editions of this to get, and I think it serves quite well. My first thought is that this book was funnier than I expected it to be. The main trio of Athos, Porthos, and Aramis are a great comic trio. Their personalities are really well defined. There's some great character development, and the way that they play off of each other is just great. And then their young protege, D'Artagnan, he's from kind of a rural part of France, and he's very hot-headed and proud, and he gets into a lot of trouble because of that, and there's a lot of comedy potential there. It's often regarded as a children's book, which I find a little bit odd. It's written in the 19th century. The language can be quite difficult at times. There are quite a few French terms or terms for things that were around in the 17th century when the book takes place that I had to look up and didn't really know. So I'd have a hard time believing that a lot of modern kids would read this and get a lot out of it, but I thought it was fun. There's a lot of good action. I really felt like The Princess Bride by William Goldman draws a lot of inspiration for this book. I saw a lot of parallels between those two books. Obviously, The Princess Bride is more overtly comedic and more modern and more of a satire, and it's somewhat... the whole conceit of The Princess Bride is that it's an edited down version with just the good parts of a long, stuffy 19th century novel. So I feel like Goldman had this in his mind because there is a lot of kind of slow parts in this as well. It's very long. There's a lot of kind of politics and court intrigue that goes into it. There's a lot of dealing with royalty. I actually had to look up some of the royalty stuff because I'm not that familiar with the court of Louis XIII and what was going on in Europe at that time. So that part drags a little bit at times, but when you get into the sword fights and you get into the comedy, it actually is, it moves along pretty quick and is a pretty entertaining read. So I could see there being a good parts edited down version of this that would be very popular. Of course, it's been made into a movie like 40 times. It's a classic story that keeps cropping up again and again. I wasn't really aware of when this book was written or when Alexandre Dumas lived. I was thinking it was earlier because the action in the book takes place in the 17th century. But actually, he was contemporary with Victor Hugo, who happens to be my favorite novelist. Lived in the middle of the 19th century, and there's a little bit of a parallel there. This is obviously a more lightweight novel and a little more humorous than anything Victor Hugo ever did, but they were contemporaries, which I didn't realize. So that was interesting to learn, even though the action takes place 200 years earlier. Obviously, the book is based on real events, but is a fictionalized version of the court of Louis XIII and some of the stuff that went on during that period in time. It gives you some knowledge of the history of that. It's obviously not a history book, it's a fiction, but I think as a historical adventure, it works really well in that context. Alexandre Dumas wrote 2 sequels to The Three Musketeers, as well as his other famous works, like The Count of Monte Cristo being the most obvious one, but he wrote many other books. This is the first one I've read. I'm not sure how eager I am to dive into the other ones, but I'd be interested in checking out the sequels. I've always been fascinated by the story of the Man in the Iron Mask. I think I saw it, a cartoon version of it that was done in DuckTales when I was a kid, and that's such a compelling idea for a story. That episode apparently takes place in the 3rd novel in the series of what are called the D'Artagnan romances. So I may have to check that out at some point, but I think I'm going to take a break from Dumas at the moment. I am very glad I read it. It's something that has been a classic that's been elusive to me. I haven't actually gotten around to it for all these years, and now I feel like I know so much more about it when I see the movie adaptations, when I see all the references to it and other things. You really get the sense of what that's about when you read the actual book. So I'm glad I did. I really did thoroughly enjoy it. Like I said, there are slow parts. It's a 19th century novel. That's going to happen. It's not, wall-to-wall action, but it is a really enjoyable read and a lot funnier than I expected it to be, with really great character development. I think that's the real strength of the book, is just the well-defined characteristics of the main characters. And you really get to know who they are, and they're complex, and they have their strengths and their weaknesses, and that's good. Whenever you have that in a book, you don't have these cardboard characters that are just vehicles for the plot. You actually get to know them as people. And it's not just true with the main Musketeers. I think every character, including the villains in the book, are well-defined and well-drawn. So that's what I thought of The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas in this handsome Everyman's Library edition. if you are a fan of 19th century literature, if you're a fan of French literature, I think you'd really get a kick out of this book. You should check it out. Until next time, I've been Logan Albright. I hope you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the comments.